All right, we're back. We appreciate once again Jerry Smitko and David Ardwan for joining us tonight, and they were the attorneys for Sergeant Kyle Faulk, who successfully won a judgment. We'll just say around $400,000. Once attorney's fees and everything calculated in, it's going to be well over $400,000 if you had interest and all that also. I was noticing, Jerry, that there was a pattern. A pattern sort of developed between the witnesses, the police officers, and not that they created the pattern, they spoke of the pattern by the police chief. That was very telling to me.
It was, and I think some of the most important testimony, of course it was all important, but Councilman Greg Hood was called as a witness. And as you know, Greg retired after 33 years with the Houma Police Department. And his testimony was that he raised what he considered First Amendment issues to the chief regarding civil service law, and he was promptly retaliated against. In fact, the chief was sending him back to shift work after 33 years on the department. And Captain Hood just wasn't going to tolerate the retaliation, so he ended up retiring. And that was the cause of his retirement. So we were able to show that jury this pattern of retaliation by Chief Duplantis.
Right. David, also, there was one point, I'm not sure what day it was, I'm confused on the days now, but when the chief took the stand for the second time, and you were asking him questions, and he was talking, explaining, and trying to give you a chronological order of things. And I'm going to let you take it from there, because I think he brought up some things that ended up being useful to your side.
Well, I think it was useful to our side because, from the beginning of this case, from the day the case was filed, the chief began to come up with different reasons why Kyle Faulk was transferred. And as I think you know this by now, the day Kyle was transferred, Kyle says, according to the testimony, Kyle says, why? The chief says, I don't owe you an explanation. In fact, I think he sent an email.
He sent it to me, actually. I was asking why, where is Kyle? Well, he was a public information officer, so where is Kyle Faulk? Yeah.
Well, later in the day, he sent something to you about four-wheelers. I need somebody to do four-wheeler patrol. He testified in the deposition, which he said, I need somebody who was four-wheeler certified. Well, that officer testified and says, ain't no such thing as four-wheeler certification. So the chief started to come up with different reasons, different stories as to why Kyle Faulk was transferred other than retaliation. And I think the point you're bringing up, during his testimony, he says for the first time, in fact, I documented all of this. I have it all documented. I kept this journal to document all this. Chief, you're required to produce it. It was requested through this litigation. Why haven't we seen this documentation you're talking about? And the truth came forward. He finally had to admit that he didn't document it at the time. It's something that he came up with after he learned he had been sued. He wrote down a bunch of notes. So I think that was the point or the testimony you were referring to, and I do think that was critical to the jurors.
And I think y'all really harped on the constitutional side of this. And David, we were talking prior to the program. Most people who own businesses, you can set rules and you can set regulations, and if people step out of bounds, I hate to use the word, but we'll use it, punish, because that's the word of the day right now. You could punish them, and you could set parameters in your company. The problem here with the chief, in a private company, he could probably get away with some of the things he did, but it was a government agency, and he was infringing on First Amendment rights, and I think you hammered that home in your close, Jerry.
Yeah, and it's important. There are different rules. You're right. There are different rules that apply to government because you're acting under color of a state law than apply to private employers. But these types of violations, civil rights violations, age discrimination, retaliatory acts for First Amendment claims, those are rights, and the government, as made obvious by this jury verdict, the government cannot tread on those rights.
Mm-hmm. where does this go now? It's all new to me, too, being in a federal court and watching it. Y'all been there before. Most people watching on TV tonight are going, okay, is that it? I mean, there's an appellate process. What happens there, David?
Well, either side in litigation has an opportunity to appeal the decision if they're not pleased with it. But through the appellate process, the trial is over. Whatever evidence has been introduced in the trial court is the only thing that can be considered by an appellate court. They look at the record. Federal court's a little different. You don't necessarily get oral argument. Both sides have to request it, and they may or may not grant it. But they're bound by the testimony, what's been presented at trial. Nothing new is going to come in, and that's essentially it.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little more. I want to give you all a chance to close on this issue. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more on this issue. Very, very interesting issue. Learned a lot in federal court this week of how it all plays out. So don't go away. We'll be right back.